Okay. Switching gears here, I want to talk about Ukraine. I want to talk Russia. This thing that a lot of people don't talk about anymore. It's just no longer important to them. But it was really important for them to let me know how apparently disgusted they were with the kinds of analysis that have been going on here since February, and I just want to continue to keep my eye on what's happening here, try to understand it, wrap my head around it, see what I can learn always, and see how people are talking about it. I noticed a new video from Majority Report, where there's a debate with Sam Cedar and somebody else on the show who seems to be, who apparently has been calling in, goes by the name Ronald Reagan, and they debated.
Okay, I'm familiar with that caller, actually.
They debated supporting Ukraine, and I thought that it was interesting, an interesting back and forth. Raised a lot of questions for me, but it just lacked good analysis, and I don't know. The caller seemed to want Sam to support it, and almost as if he didn't support it enough. But at the same time, he also wanted Sam to have the conversation about whether or not, the intervention was good to begin with. And it's just like, well, homie, if he's agreeing with you that he wants to arm him, then he does. But he almost wanted Sam to. It felt like an op, dude. It almost felt like he wanted Sam to answer the question whether or not it was moral or not, whether or not the United States should be intervening at all. And it doesn't feel like that is really part of their conversation. Okay, so let's talk about
check
it.
Out.
Let me go at this thread first. I want to look at this thread first, because we could read this before or after, I guess, but I want the conversation to be in context of, I think, what
actually happened.
Relevant context of what led up to this, instead of just talking about it from where we are right at this fucking second, which is, should we give them more guns, which is the way that they're framing their conversation. All right, so I guess we'll start here.
Great.
All right, and thank you again, Ross, for being with me. Love your face. This is tweeter History of Armani 2. History O Armani 2. Russia is evil and attacked Ukraine for no reason.
True.
Okay.
Wait, what? I thought this was a test. Is this not a true false? Okay. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. Let's go. False.
Right. False.
Maybe.
But this is sort of like how it's being framed by a lot of people. And yes. I'm not saying this is accurate of the Majority Report video, but this is how it's being framed by a lot of people. All right, so in order to push back against that, I do have a thread in my thread of threads on my Twitter, which is pinned to the top of my Twitter account. Check it out. So here's a small timeline thread of events. Let's talk about it. In 2013, true or false, Ross?
Yes.
Were there fascist far-right protests in Ukraine?
True.
All right. Is that entirely the whole story? Wasn't it like wasn't it like a sort of like a nice feel-goody protest, which isn't it more fair to say was co-opted by fascists?
Yes, there was certainly protests that were happening around the president at the time's policies. Really, he was trying to walk a more neutral territory between Russia and the EU. And I believe he had withdrawn from what may have been an EU deal. And there were some protests around that from Ukrainians who wanted to tie themselves more closely to the EU. So what started as popular protests about policy was co-opted by ultranationalists.
Conversation. Russia is evil and attacked Ukraine for no reason. Here's conversation. Russia.
I hit the wrong button. Yeah, okay. I didn't mean to interrupt. Did you have anything else?
No, that was all.
I agree. Then in 2014, a deal between pro-NATO, anti-NATO factions of Ukraine's government's made, stating Ukraine will never be part of NATO. That happened?
I believe that did happen. That was part of the Minsk Accord, I believe. Or
The Minsk agreements. They keep saying the Minsk agreements. That's what they're talking about, huh, chat? Matt's in chat saying the right sector guy said it would have been a gay parade, a gay pride parade without our movement. Yeah, and the irony is like people are like acting like by supporting Ukraine they're helping gay people or something.
Right.
You'll actually see the framing in the video.
I think that sort of belies or reveals the point that that individual seems to think that the protests becoming a revolution/coup wouldn't have happened had they not been there. So they are taking credit for being the part of the protests that made it the coup. Um, it's literally telling on themselves.
Wolfeye in chat saying Minsk 1 was not honored by any side. Minsk 2 had a lot of progress, but Ukraine gave up on it in the end. But you mistyped it and you said NED, which I actually think is pretty funny. Like that's a non-typo typo, you know what I mean? It actually works either way. All right, so 2014, fascist-led militias in Ukraine stormed parliament, making the president flee for his life. Is it not true that they would have lynched him in the streets like they did Gaddafi if people like Hillary Clinton and Victoria Nuland, had their way, right?
That's certainly a plausible end when a violent mob gets their hands on a leader that they don't like.
Yeah. Soon after a neo-Nazi regime created, they banned the Russian language and began making clear statements of wanting to join NATO. Is any of that inaccurate?
No, that's all accurate. They definitely
Okay.
ramped up the persecution of what they view as a Russian minority within the Ukrainian population.
They stormed the president's home after he left? I'm not sure I knew that. All right. Reading on, 2014, both parties in the U.S. and their media allies cheered for the fascist-led coup that overthrew Ukraine's government. Yeah.
Yeah, we even had senators and representatives go over and hand out cookies and give speeches and throw their support behind and stand on the stage with people who explicitly see and goose step.
Who's stepping? Absolutely. 2014 referendums take place in Crimea. 95% of the people voting to join Russia. And of course, this shit makes libs go wild. They just hate this, right? They just cannot wrap their head around it. This is one of those facts that just makes their head explode. They just cannot accept it. They think, it wasn't a real referendum, or I don't know.
Right. And with no international, but of course, all the international observers are usually tied to the United States in some way. So, how do you satisfy somebody who is intent on delegitimizing Russia anyway? Um, how do you legitimate that election when your entire underlying purpose is to break apart Russia?
Yeah. 2014, U.S. accuses Russia of seizing Ukraine because of the referendum that took place. 2014, Donetsk and Luhansk declare independence from Ukraine after realizing the U.S.-backed government in Kiev was illegitimate. And this is the thing that every lib will not face, which is that the U.S. couped Ukraine. They got their puppet illegitimate government in there, but they're going to act like now the U.S. cares about Ukrainian sovereignty from Russia. They cannot square that circle, but they just, so I think most of the time they just ignore this. Or they go, well, that doesn't mean Russia should have invaded. But it's just like, still, they find every way to just ignore it.
Yeah, and again, we're not moralizing about Russia's invasion.
No.
We're talking about the facts and conditions that led up to it, and certainly played a role in Putin's decision to initiate it.
Right.
You know, obviously, uh, Putin doesn't take my advice on policy. We don't talk. We're not on speaking terms.
No.
So me telling him to withdraw his troops and, initiate a ceasefire is going to be as effective as me telling Zelensky to do it. Because again, I'm also not on speaking terms with Zelensky.
Yeah.
So my prescriptions are largely irrelevant. Um, but I do, want to understand what's happening, um, so that I can be better informed, and make decisions if it comes to it about who I am going to throw my support behind, if I'm going to throw my support behind anyone, as if my support in this situation matters.
Right. At the end of the day,
Um,
what's most important is we just get we understand what's going on.
right. Um, I can simultaneously, um, condemn uh, Putin's invasion and condemn the United States cooing Ukraine's government.
Right. I mean, if we're going to be upset about the invasion, if we're going to be on the side of civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk, in Ukraine, and throughout Ukraine, then we have to ask ourselves, what were the conditions that led to this war? We have to understand them. And I don't think people can have, they're not adding to the conversation if they don't have that basic understanding. And that includes me. Like I didn't have anything to add to the conversation until I understood this stuff. And I hope I can add to it now, but I won't be able to if I don't understand this. Okay, so how about
Yeah.
2014? By summer, I'm sorry, Ross, feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, dialectical materialism isn't about um, deciding, like who's morally correct.
Right.
It's about analyzing what's happening and why, and then from there we can make prescriptions.
Yeah.
But until then, we need to be better informed.
All right, 2014. By the summer, the Ukrainian military began bombing towns in Donbass. Civilians are there. Most of them speak Russian, identify as Russian. Striking their homes, their schools, infrastructure of civilians living in Donetsk and Luhansk. And their reasoning, they say, is, oh, the Russian separatists are taken over or whatever.
I don't know. That seems kind of like an indiscriminate terror campaign.
And they're doing it with the support of the West at this time, yeah? Even then, I believe this
Yeah,
is
at that
that
point, we're already have
Hey, guys.
advisors on the ground in Ukraine,
Probably for years
helping
at
to
that
shape their
point.
military, and facilitating the training between Azov and the Grey Wolves and the Georgian Legion.
Georgian Legion, other right sector. It's not just Azov. It's not just right sector as well. They got the entire military saying Slava Ukraini, a Nazi war cry. They got the whole army singing about Bandera. All right, so this happened. We're to
True.
believe that the CIA and other Western forces, of course, all these international legions, like we've mentioned, the terroristic Georgian Legion including, they've been there probably since way before 2014, probably for years, but definitely through 2014, through the last 8 years, leading up till now. But 2014, by fall, the Russian Federation began seeking out diplomatic talks with the U.S.-backed government of Ukraine, hoping to stop the bloodshed being caused by Ukrainian bombs in Donbass. But by this point, Ukraine's like, all right, well, I don't know. Really feels like the West really likes us. We're the belle of the ball over here. They're giving us all these arms. Why would they stop? They don't. Since the 2014 coup, the Russian Federation tried appeasing to the U.S. government-backed regime in Kiev, holding on to the idea the U.S. wouldn't be so dumb as to threaten Russia on its borders, one of its clearly stated red lines. Starting in the winter of 2015 all the way up until now, UNICEF condemned Ukraine's onslaught in Donbass as a humanitarian crisis. Even then, Russia didn't retaliate to the ethnic Russians being slaughtered by the U.S.-backed regime in Kiev. Russia still sought diplomacy.
Well, UNICEF is a well-known Putinist propaganda outlet.
Ross, if this were happening to the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, don't you think Adrian Zenz and the West would be using this evidence as evidence of, I don't know, genocide against the Uyghurs in Xinjiang?
Absolutely.
Okay. But, of course, that's not happening in Xinjiang.
Not to my knowledge, no.
But it happened in Donbass. But they're not mentioning that as somehow a targeted campaign against Russians and their culture. Is that curious to you?
Well, our side doesn't do that.
Okay. Was it okay? All right. We're having a good time. Everyone's having a good time? Yeah. That's all right. It was UN monitors, Matt's in chat says UN monitors said there would be a total of a few dozen Russian soldiers in Donbass over those 8 years. A few dozen Russian soldiers? I'm not sure. What does that mean?
The narrative from Ukraine had been that Russia sent in their little green men, and effectively the entirety of the Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic's military was just Russian.
Okay. But it was really just a... Okay, not. They were lying again. They lied again.
Weaselly little liars, man.
Every time, dude.
Got a comment in chat from Wolf Eye.
I don't know.
Even if NATO and Ukraine's volunteer battalions were the ones that advanced into the separatist regions, both sides did war crimes in 2014. Both sides prosecuted war criminals after 2014, but the NATO mercenaries continue to target civilians and civilian infrastructure.
With the support of the West, with the support of the most powerful military and military-industrial complex in the history of the world. And they're profiting off of it, too. Making money. And at the same time, they're the people saying we need to be doing the war, and the rest of us are saying no. But of course, we don't get a fucking vote. There's no democracy here. None of us voted for the escalation in Ukraine. Although, at the same time, if they put it to a vote, I'm scared that the state of media these days is such that people would vote for it, including viewers of the Majority Report. Are you ready for the video?
Yeah, let's look it up.
Okay. Before we watch it, I understand this is a caller, Ronald Reagan, calling in with his plea for continuing support for Ukraine. Reagan's very strongly in support of continuing U.S. military support for Ukraine, but Sam's asking what the conditions of the victory look like. Okay.
That is a super important question.
Yeah.
And
we're here.
I've brought it up a couple of times. The Paul Massaro on Twitter, he regularly is like, Ukraine victory is the only, way. And it's like, well, bro, what does Ukraine victory, what is that?
Spell it out.
And now he's explicitly saying, it's demilitarization, denuclearization, decolonization. Effectively, he wants the dissolution of the Russian Federation.
It's just State Department shit. Checks all the boxes for neoconservative imperialism. Just plain old U.S. interventionism. never seen an intervention they don't like. Basic PJ in the house. Welcome in, homie. Everyone follow PJ. All right. So we're going to watch this video. Apparently they've spoken with this guy in the past. And what I want to say right now is I want to be very patient with this video. I'm not here to go after Sam Cedar like I've gone after the explicit neoliberals, such as Dylan Burns and the Vouches and, the people, the Merricks, whatever, the people who are what I consider to be the neoliberal content, in the neoliberal content creator sphere of influence. I've called these people who want to give arms to Ukraine, knowing that when we arm Ukraine, those arms end up in the hands of Nazis, and we can agree with that, right, Ross?
Right.
Knowing that that's the case, you can be a scholar of history. You can be a scholar of World War II and of the Holocaust. You can have all of the stories of the Holocaust and be able to tell me all about it. But at the end of the day, you're going to tell me that, hey, sometimes we got to give Nazis guns anyways? I just think that's a form of Holocaust denial that I cannot look past. It's not the most explicit Holocaust denial, which says, oh, it didn't happen, but it's acting like it didn't happen through policy, and that just boggles my mind. Okay, so there's that. What we're not going to do is spend all my time on that. What I do want to do is try to make sure I understand what debate they're having, the angle at which they're coming at it, and what they're leaving out of the equation by the way that they're framing it in the way that they do. This is a 42-minute talk.
Now, my
Please.
Understanding is that Nazis want guns. And if you help them get those guns or are in support of that, in a way you are collaborating, with Nazis for them to accomplish their goals. And I don't want to go through life being a Nazi collaborator.
Yeah. They'll say, oh, well, Dan, I'm not a Nazi apologist. I don't believe in the same things Nazis believe. But I'm like, homie, even if you don't, even if you disagree with everything the Nazi believes, once you give them that gun, aren't you empowering all of those other beliefs? And they just can't seem to see that, or they do, and they're just like doing a debate bro thing, and I'm sick of it.
Well, I think they're hoping that the gun won't get used on them,
Well, if a Nazi's not an immediate threat to you, maybe you're not doing it right. All right. Let's get into the video. The framing of the video is pretty much like, well, here we are. How much more guns should we give Ukraine? That's just, if I can TLDR it. That's being unfair, though. And I want to be fair. I'm not going to... Let's just take our time. Here we go. Let me know when you want to pause.
Yep.
More information. Ronald Reagan is an immigration attorney in Florida with good positions on domestic issues. He and Sam have been getting all the Ukrainian on Russia and Ukraine from Western MSM sources. Now that's fucking problematic. And also allegedly he was anti-Bernie, which is, I'm curious. I'm assuming anti-Bernie from the right, which is not good because Bernie's still an imperialist.
Right.
And away we go.
Look, I don't want to tone police. I'm going to say my piece on Ukraine, and then we can leave it at that.
Okay.
So obviously I've called in before. I've mentioned my wife is from Ukraine. My mother-in-law, who's sick in the other room, is too. And, when I read on Twitter, there's explosions in Kyiv, I've got to let them know so that they can call people and make sure things are okay. So I understand that there's a personal bias that comes into this, but, and I follow the war probably closer than a lot of people because of that. But from my perspective, the Western weapons are highly effective. They've taken back a huge amount of territory. They're being used to protect the skies, the air defense systems and things that they've received from Europe and the West. But also I just think like Digby said the other day.
So, he's saying arming Ukraine is good.
There is.
Well, he's saying that arming Ukraine is effective for Ukraine defending itself.
Yeah. Is it?
Which the underlying sort of point is that Ukraine needs to exist in its current state.
Yeah. Yeah, he's arguing. He's like, yes, Ukraine defend itself. It should defend itself against Russia. That's a good thing. But again, it just starts the conversation like right where we are, and it doesn't recognize anything that led up to this, and so that's one of my issues. But
Right.
It's a lot longer. Let's keep digging in.
Growing global fascism, and it's a serious thing. And
Hold on, I want to go back.
The air defense systems and things that they've received from Europe and the West. But also, I just think, like Digby said the other day, there is growing global fascism, and it's a serious thing. And the Russian army is at potentially a breaking point. I know that's a scary position for them to be in, but to me, that's a
He's pointing at Russia, and he's saying that Russia is
clearly he doesn't include the United States as part of the glowing global fascism, and the Russian army is near breaking, where they've just mobilized 300,000 troops.
Yeah.
Seems to be a non-material analysis.
It does seem to be the case. And that's just like the narrative they want you to think. They want people to believe Russia's losing. That also helps manufacture consent to sending more arms, so that the next time Biden goes, oh, we're sending $50 billion more dollars, none of us are marching in the streets or anything. That's the kind of thing they want to prevent.
Well,
yeah.
Chief Supreme, the reason why he would talk about it, what led up to it, is because that's the material reality. The fact that he has family there, he acknowledges, makes him biased. And we're trying to have a material understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. Arming Ukraine's effective Ukraine defending itself. Is it really? They lost Donbass, and they're dying in swaths. Huge swaths of Ukrainians are dying, and they're running out of arms and weapons.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that they're untrained conscripts. Russia has mandatory military service, so everybody that is like physically able to has to do basic military training and serve a little bit of time. So these are reservists that are being activated, people that are trained, and yeah, they might be frightened and afraid. Uh, Draftees often are. You can ask people that we shipped off to World War II and Vietnam how they felt. Um, that's just how it is. That's war. Don't the idea that Russia doesn't have a professional military force is that's cope.
The caller refers to the Russia as I think is lumping Russia into growing global fascism, but I don't see Russia as a form of fascism. I think that's a non-material analysis, and it's sort of like a liberal analysis, and feeds into, the audience and majority report would totally eat that up, because I don't think maybe they're covering Russia fairly over there. Not to say I'm like big into Putin, but it does appear as though Russia is the largest anti-colonial force on the planet. Is that a non-material understanding? Ross, chat, what do you think?
I think it stands in opposition to the largest colonial force.
Right, which doesn't mean we give it uncritical support. We give it uncritical. I'm sorry, we give it critical support.
Hey guys,
we're critical of it when we need to be. That's what I'm saying. Sorry, my words.
I mean, if we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that Russia wouldn't immediately go full fash if capital felt it threatened to a significant degree there. But that isn't to say that Russia is explicitly a colonial uh, state. You know, it's not. Um, Russia doesn't have military bases all over the world quite like we do. You know.
Right. A lot of times people, people who sort of are from the West, Americans will point and they'll want to say Russia is just as bad as the United States. China's just as bad as the United States. Well, even if they were, they don't have the tools to employ the evil that the United States is doing. Yeah. So there's that. Okay. I like what Nays said. Anti-colonial doesn't sound right. Chat, this is an open conversation in the sense that I'm willing to be updated on things, and I appreciate y'all working with me to try to get the best understanding of what's going on here. Saying anti-colonial doesn't sound right. They're against the current colonial hegemony. Against the current colonial hegemony. The current colonial hegemony, of course, being U.S., NATO, EU. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
And of course, Russia is one of the biggest forces standing in opposition to that. Also included in that list, the global South, I guess. China, Vuvuzela, etc.
Iran.
Etc. North Korea.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Just like why we on this channel, we don't just do the knee-jerk lib thing, which is like, oh, North Korea, oh, they're a bunch of weirdos, oh, they cry, they force people to cry over there. It's like, well, go look at Britain, homie. What they did for the fucking queen over there. You kidding me? They still got people mad that she's in a box.
Lizzie's in a box. Lizzie's in a box.
Yes. All right. And chat, if you've got a really important message you want to make sure I see, you can always type Dan. If you type up in your chat, it should be able to pull up the comment again. And if you type Dan, it'll highlight on my end. Russia's military doctrines, regional dominance, U.S. military doctrines, global dominance. So there's a conflict.
Nays is correct. Putin did want Russia or the Russian Federation to join NATO. And they said no, because NATO is explicitly an anti-Russian organization meant to eventually balkanize, and absorb Russia.
Is that not escalation? Is economic war not escalation? This is what the West does. It does economic
it's got
war.
The word war in there.
It does economic war on people to the point where they get so fucking pissed off where they want to do war to the West. And then they're like, oh, see how there's savages. These savages are coming after us. They want to do a war. That's the attitude, is it not?
More or less, yeah. Like, why can't you just be civil? Why can't you, deprive, the people of a nation of their food and living resources in a civil way? Do it nicely. Do it more nice.
Hold on a second. Is this a new chatter? Are you serious?
Would you say that NATO has pro-democracy as a principle?
Yeah. No, not me. Or is that just something that they say? Are you joking? Or because you're new, I don't know if you're doing sarcasm. You say NATO is pro-democracy. Are you serious? Yes, absolutely. No. Come on. Democracy for whom? Working class people or democracy for the oligarchs? You've got to be kidding me right now. You've got no perennial in your life if you actually believe that. That is not a material analysis. Democracy for working class people or oligarchs? You better get this answer right. Otherwise, you're not invited. You're at the babies. You need to go back to the kids' table. You think you're sitting at the adult table, but you're not. I hope you're joking. Please, please, please tell me you're joking so that I don't have to waste any more time dealing with this. I want to move on, okay? But if you're not joking, I gotta get rid of you. In theory, everyone. Yes, it's messy. Get the fuck out of here. Goodbye. You don't have a material analysis. Go back to the kids' table. All right, Ross.
Dan, NATO is like SHIELD, okay? And BRICS is like Hydra, okay?
Yeah.
And we're the good guys because we're with SHIELD. And they're the bad guys because they're with Hydra, okay? We like freedom and democracy, and they just want to make everyone wear the same uniforms and have the same haircuts. And they want to take away your freedoms.
All right. I consider that like an imperial dog whistle because like it gets these imperialists to shut their head off anytime like an NED funded NGO is like, oh, we want to do a democracy. We want to do a democracy in Jakarta. Come on. So this is one of those imperial dog whistles. And if chat, if maybe we could just pause and just come up with brainstorm some of these other imperial dog whistles. Whenever the West is like, oh, we need to go over here and give them some of this, XYZ, what are those things that they're saying that they actually never believe in? And you know that they don't believe in giving these other countries these things because they don't believe in giving them to us here in the United States. One of those things is, yes, democracy. They don't care about democracy here. What makes you think they care about democracy in Ukraine? What makes you think they care about democracy in China? What makes you think they care about democracy in Iran? Women's rights. What makes you think they care about the women of Iran?
Human rights is a dog.
Human rights. Just human rights. Women's rights, LGBTQIA. In the United States, you know, they're about to like ban drag shows, and they want you to think that the same people who are in control of those things somehow care about the LGBTQIA across. Get the fuck out of here. What else? Equality, freedom. Yeah, they just say freedom. Fuck yourself with your freedom. We don't have freedom here. Freedom for who? Yeah. What else?
Free markets.
Oh, my poor free market. My poor market's in chains. I stay up all night wondering whether or not my market's in chains. I prefer it when the working class is in chains. Fucking neoliberals. Yeah.
Regime. They Imperial dog whistle. They always call other places
just
regime.
The word regime, yeah. Regime's prosperity, huh? Yeah, stuff like this. Free and fair elections. Rules-based order. Come on. These are all imperial dog whistles. Anytime a content creator or someone's like using this, or they got someone on talking about this, really what they want is regime change. What are these imperial dog whistles for? Regime change. That's all they've ever wanted. And they don't care what happens in the process. Terrorism. Oh, we're going to go over there and get their terrorism and give them the democracies and women's rights. All right? It's all bullshit. Don't believe them anytime they say any of these things. How about sovereignty? Oh, we care about the sovereignty of a nation. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. Sovereign.
We care so much that we'll, you know, invade your airspace and blow up all your stuff. And,
yeah,
you know, we love sovereignty.
Did I spell this? This looks so fucked. Sovereignty. Sovereignty. Ay. Not my best. All right. Yeah. Fair trials. Fair elections. Fair trials. Do we get fair elections? Yeah, fair trials, I guess. Justice. Fair trials. All right. You get the idea. Never believe these dog whistles because they'll say them and they're hoping that people just shut their brains off. Back to the video, Ross. Ready?
Oh, one more. Political prisoners.
Yeah. Political prisoners. That's perfect. Start to see these patterns, chat. WMDs. WMDs nuts. I can't believe that worked. Self-determination, sovereignty. Yeah. Corruption, just corruption. Unless that becomes an inconvenient talking point, like in Ukraine. One of the most fucking corrupt place on earth. Nuclears. Don't forget about the nuclears. Nuclear capability. All right,
Yeah.
let's move on.
What happens when you give up your nukes?
You bend the knee to the West.
Yep.
All right, back to the video.
It's a good thing that they be defeated. The other day, Putin announced annexation of 4 territories. And I don't think you guys covered it, but he basically gave a Tucker Carlson style. There was part of it. It was from Tucker Carlson about how in the West they'll change your kid's gender and they make up pronouns. Like, it's straight out of a Tucker monologue.
Yeah.
And so
I don't know if we ever got footage of that. We should.
Yeah.
We should look for it.
Yeah. So if there's time for, and I know it's not that kind of show, but like if there's 20 minutes to talk about Joe Rogan getting a cat box story wrong, like it bears mentioning that a nuclear power is engaged in an unprovoked war of aggression against.
There.
Unprovoked.
What do you think? An unprovoked war of aggression.
Sure.
That just sort of boils it down and it just reduces it. And just like Sam Cedars sitting there, and he just lets him say it. I don't think he really pushes back on it. So assuming that he doesn't push back on it, what do you think about that? Chat, Ross, what do you think about that? The unprovoked war of aggression. Is that a material analysis of the war in Ukraine? Does this help you, if that's what, if you were to believe what he just said, does that help you understand what's really going on there? Is that helping the viewers of Majority Report have a material analysis of what's actually going on there? Or is this actually distracting them from having good analysis? What do you think?
No, I mean, it's clearly just like a Western talking point. I think what Chomsky has a good clip about. He searched unprovoked war of aggression or whatever, and it barely showed up at all for Iraq, but it showed up a ton for this war in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Judah says no, it's annoying because Sam almost certainly has to know that's a lie. It just imagines the whole thing it just ignores all of the history that we talked about a moment ago, and that's why I felt like I had to read it. Because listening to this, what I believe is, I don't know, dude, just Imperial talking points on Majority Report.
Well, let's see how he pushes back, or whatever he does, how he responds. I mean,
and again, I think I pre-watched it, and I do believe he didn't push back. I could be wrong about that, and I'd be happy to be wrong. That's the point. Yeah. I want his audience to have a better understanding.
Clearly, this is Ronald Reagan's framing,
right? Yeah, but again, I think Sam goes with it. What am I looking at for later? Thank you, Effusive. Thank you. But that's the point. I just had to watch this in the light of day with that material analysis going into this. Otherwise, Reagan gets away with that kind of comment, and it just does, and it makes sense somehow on the Majority Report because there isn't that context. Okay, here we go. Yeah, pretty frustrating to listen to. I'm trying to break it down in a very patient way here.
A country of 45 million people is talking about exterminating LGBT people and using the same terminology as our fact.
Trying to make it seem like Russia's super anti-LGBTQIA, but by extension, sort of saying that Ukraine is much better. Is that sort of the implication?
Well, he probably isn't necessarily aware of the anti-queer sentiment in Ukraine, or perhaps isn't willing to acknowledge it, since he's already said that he's biased.
Already,
Um,
yeah, he's admitted bias. What about the Ukrainian Nazis? Not to say that everyone in Ukraine in the armed forces is a Nazi, but what about the Nazis? Do they historically like gay and trans people?
my understanding of history is that they do not.
Okay, so that's a contradiction there that they don't really bring up. Let's go on.
Fascists who are also in a position of potentially rising back to power. And that's like a scary place to be in. And we should be standing up against it and fighting against it.
Did Putin say anything about extermination of anyone except Nazis? Yeah, no. But they'll say like, oh, well, this Russian general said some weird fucked up shit too. And I'm like, well, Dylan Burns said some fucked up shit about wiping Donbass off the face of the earth. So it's like they're all engaging in this fucked up shit. I wish it would stop. I don't support anyone talking about like that. Except Nazis. I'm okay with the
That ideology going away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Right.
all right. But either way, moving on.
Against it. And I just don't think, the idea that I see lots of creative thinking on, well, what if we get involved? Like, what are the worst case scenarios? And you have to do that. Like, if we send weapons, what are the repercussions? What are the things that could happen? Potential blowback, of course. But I don't see any engagement on the left.
On the other side, of that.
Okay, let's let Russia wash over a country of 45 million people where there's been mass graves, the destruction of a language and a culture. And
Oh my God, that's projection.
That's hyperbolic.
Guy.
Sorry.
I don't think there's been evidence of destruction of a language or culture.
That's fucked. It's the opposite. If anything, it's the opposite. Because they were trying to destroy Russian culture in Donbass.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that globally we've seen like Russophobia attacks aimed at statues of like Lenin and statues at Marx, and it's like, bro, do you history?
So we're getting just literal. I think the guy's getting away with just making up history. Sorry, what's the term for that? History revisionism. Yeah, just pure revisionism. Like there's no one in the room pushing back on that. All right.
Let's let Russia wash over a country of 45 million people where there's been mass graves.
Mass graves, aka the soldiers died in war and they literally just buried them, right? And they're just going to say mass graves. Well, it's war. People die in war. I wish the war would end. But they buried them and like marked the graves. Am I right? And they're saying, oh, these are big bad mass graves.
Undocumented mass graves perpetrated by either side. Awful things happen in war. I have seen reports of that came out initially of mass graves that turned out to be like a graveyard.
Right. We've seen that, and then they didn't walk back their claims. We've seen Amy Goodman do that. She didn't walk back her claims, and then the next round of mass graves comes up, and she just does it again.
Yeah, and then recently there was that video of bodies getting dumped into a pit that was attributed to Russians, and then it came out that it was Ukrainians that were doing it.
But of course, they didn't seem to care at that point. They didn't care. Like they cared when they thought it was the Russians doing it, but they didn't care when they found out it was actually the Ukrainians coming back into the parts of the towns where Russia held it for a while, and then they left, and they got pushed back by the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians find pro-Russian people and killed them and allegedly shot them and put them in these mass graves, and they didn't care about that. I think we should care about civilians all the time and just be consistent about that. All right. And let's keep listening. The guy does keep getting more and more worked up.
The destruction of a language and a culture.
The destruction of a language and a culture, that's what they did to the Russians in Donbass. What is he talking about? That is wild.
And a guy who's comparing himself to Peter the Great. let's let them just get right up to Poland and sort of see what happens. And do we really think he's going to be less dangerous if we let that happen? Like, okay, he's going to cut back on the nuclear saber rattling if we just sort of let this happen. And I don't think he is less dangerous in that scenario. So, and it would be one thing if like we supplied weapons in February and they were engaged.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ross, go ahead. I didn't catch that.
Just I was looking at Sam's reaction to Ronald Reagan talking, and Sam's like looking like he's trying to figure out how to navigate this conversation.
It really does. You could see the wheels turning because he's balancing, I believe, a lot of different forces right now, including his audience. I do believe that like he does a thing where he sort of follows his audience. He doesn't lead. He's scared to say what he really thinks, right? What do you think about that?
I mean, there's an arithmetic.
Yeah, there's a lot of calculus
when you're at that size. Yep. There's an arithmetic.
Yeah, you cannot ignore that. So that, but to me, it like sticks out like a sore thumb because I'm just willing to say what the fuck I think. I'm not doing that same calculus. He's making financial decisions as he's debating. Like the capitalism is getting into his debate is what I'm saying. And that's one of my main things is I really, really, really try my best to not let the capitalism infect my brain as I try to learn about the world and have a better material analysis of it. Of course, there's this thing where I'm making content and it's hard, but I'm really trying. If I wanted to go full sicko mode, I would have done it by now. I would have gone debate mode. I would have been debating Dylan Burns and Vaush or whatever the last week, Merrick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am not going to go full sicko mode. Chat, I promise you that. But it seems like he's going semi-sicko mode and he's like thinking about these things. It's like factoring into the way he's having the conversation. And I feel like you cannot ignore that. Yeah. Okay. We're 4 minutes in.
In this slog, no advancement on either side, then I would understand, frankly, your tone of like, Jesus Christ, like how long can we supply this sort of conflict? But that's not what's happened at all. They were repelled from Kyiv, kicked all the way back to the Belarusian border. They've taken back huge swaths of territory, and they have all the momentum, and the Russians are fleeing from Kherson, it looks like. So it just seems like a really weird time to be like, this isn't working, it's too expensive. I don't know. And so when I hear, I know she's not there to defend herself, but when I hear Emma say, like, we don't have a dog in this fight, so and our weapons are prolonging the war, so we should withdraw support. What I hear is prolonging the war. In other words, in her mind, the inevitable is that Russia wins. Okay, so we should hasten the victory of the Russians by withdrawing support. And we don't have a dog in this fight is like totally blind to the reality of the conflict. Like, do we not have solidarity with trans kids in Ukraine? Or is it?
And that's the virtue signaling,
there it is.
Vibes-based, crap.
Wow, that is so shameless. The way that Sam lets him get away with it throughout the entire thing.
He's a regular caller, So I appreciate that he's like not biting the dude's head off. I'm interested to see. I haven't watched it, so that's
only the ones in Texas, or what about just? And it sounds like, I know this is going to get me labeled as a, shit lib or whatever, but maybe democracy does matter. Like, you just had
this guy. Honestly, the more he talks, the more it feels like he's like reading a script and it's an op.
An interview about how our own fascists plan to just not look at the rules and invent new rules to not have elections, and that's bad.
All right.
So, anyways, that's all I'm going to say. I don't want you guys to think like I'm going to be calling back in every time you have a contrary position or whatever. And I'm not going to try and tone police, but I just felt like it's worth saying that.
He literally tone policed. He's like, well, you spend 20 minutes. You should be able to spend certain minutes on Bucha.
And Sam, you've been saying people are apathetic. Nobody's paying attention to this. Nobody's questioning the amount of money. But
he literally
did. It's the opposite. I see Ukrainian flags everywhere I go, and people, I know, and I talk to, and the different places I go, I see high levels of solidarity with the Ukrainian people. And in my mind, that's the way that it should be.
No, I think that's. I mean, I think there's no one really talking about
there's solidarity with the Ukrainian people mean.
What does it mean?
Yeah, does he mean that like people are volunteering, from his town to go over there and fight? Like, what does high levels of solidarity with the Ukrainian people? What does that mean and look like besides hanging flags? To him, For me, solidarity with the Ukrainian people would be advocating for a ceasefire and negotiations.
Yeah. Peace.
I mean, that's my solidarity with the Ukrainian people. So I don't know what he's got a weird vibes-based analysis. Obviously, he's got bias. He's got, he said himself that his partner has family there.
Yeah.
It seems like Sam's just not pro-Ukrainian enough for him.
Yeah.
And it's bugging him.
It's bugging him, and he is tone policing him because he doesn't like the tone. All right, one leader. Crossing the Rubicon in the Rubicon. Tier 1 subby, you love to see it. Thank you, homie. Let's go. Thank you. Yeah. Let's keep going here.
Without a doubt, I think, broadly speaking, solidarity with the Ukrainian people. But let me just push back on the margins here, okay? Because I think the question is, at what point? Okay, so, and yes, I think the idea that Russia would come in, decapitate the Ukrainian leadership, which was their agenda, and I think, frankly, from what I've read, is exactly what we thought was going to happen. They were going to come in within a couple of days. They were going to either exile or kill Zelensky. They were going to put in a puppet regime in Ukraine. They would be able to very effectively, annex and end essentially the conflict in the Donbass and annex, Crimea.
I got to put on my Sam glasses here if I want to be on his level,
et cetera, et cetera. That didn't happen. But I guess the issue is, like, at what point? So does this end when Ukraine gets all the Donbass back? And I mean, is that and Crimea? Is that what's the end game?
So
is my question. And there doesn't and
Sam's pushing back.
Yep. And that's a good question. What is the end game?
What's the end game? This is Sam's main point, which is, where does it end? Where does it end? When do we stop giving them guns? When do we, what's the goal here? Where are we going towards? Otherwise, we're in this endless war like we always do. As in, when will we learn? Okay, so that's the framing of it. It doesn't ask the question, should we be there to begin with? But we'll talk about that later.
That's the Crimea question, I think, is really encapsulates it. Like, I've never said, like, Russia should be allowed to push to Poland. And, like, didn't take a stance saying that we shouldn't take give any material support to Ukraine. But in this position where, like Reagan says, like, they're being pushed back, is it like, okay, retaking Crimea is just like, that's a goal, and questioning that is a problem?
The question is like, what is the end game? Like, I agree with you. You cannot appease Putin. But I think part of the reason why people don't, envision the
what did the United States government? What did Raytheon guy say the end game was? He said it was to weaken Russia. Did he not? He literally said just weaken Russia. They eventually want to push the Balkanize and neoliberalize Russia even more, right? We can agree that that's their goal.
Therefore, I mean, that seems to be the plan, that has been used with the neoliberal agenda. Easiest way to eat something big is one bite at a time.
Balkanize it. Hopefully get some regime change in there, or just get regime chaos, get people hating on Putin or whatever. The United States loves chaos. It profits from it. So that's what they're trying to do. And it seems missing from this conversation.
The sort of the rolling through Europe scenario that you're talking about was because, for the most part, when Russia did take Crimea in 2014, when they did essentially, semi-occupy these regions, the Donbass, it did not really, it didn't show up on anybody's radar in this country, broadly speaking. Obviously, in certain areas, and there was no sense of like, oh my God, Western Europe is under threat. Now, obviously, Putin's invasion of Ukraine set off some alarm bells. You have 2 new members of NATO that I think nobody would have thought even 2 years ago would ever be members of NATO.
Okay. We have new members of NATO. Is that not NATO escalation?
My perspective is yes. The existence and growth of NATO poses a direct threat to Russia and any country, honestly, that isn't a part of NATO, because we've seen NATO intervene in countries around the world.
It makes everyone less safe. It escalates. It inches towards nuclear war. How do we not see this? Like, I'd like to move away from this mutually assured destruction. But people seem happy to move towards it, and I'm just so fucking sick of it. This seems easy. This seems like an easy. It seems like t-ball. If we're talking about, politics and geopolitics, we on the left should be like, wait, hold on, denuclearize, move away from it at every opportunity. But what happens is people do these mental backflips and get them tied up their brains tied up in knots, and they get themselves inching towards more nukes, more. Oh my God, dude. I just don't, I'm sick of it. I'm just really sick of it.
The only thing that will make us more safe is more nukes.
This is sickening stuff, homie.
Because if everybody has nukes, then nobody will use them. Or like accidentally, through some sort of miscommunication, accidentally launch one because they think they're under attack. And then they're really not. But then other countries respond and they launch their nukes. And then it's crap.
Right. All right. So that seems missing from the discussion, and we'll continue watching.
But the question is, what's the end game? I mean, is it to get rid of all the separatists in the Donbass? Is it to reclaim Crimea? Is that? And I understand where the argument.
Well, you have to get the war even remotely into the territory of where that's a negotiation that can take place.
Okay.
Where that's even on
What does that mean?
the table.
Okay.
And it's not there. So
okay, it may not be there, but when I've talked about conditions on money, it is to, at the very least, to start to raise the question of like, what happens when we get there? I'm not saying if they're rolling through this and it's a cakewalk by the time they get to Crimea or the Donbass, that we should say, whoa. We had this plan where, there was going to be, but I think that it is not unreasonable when you are financing this war where U.S. interests, just speaking strictly about U.S. interests, okay? And yes, I don't want Russia to come in and oppress transgender kids in Ukraine. Of course not.
That weird talking point keeps coming up. I can't believe that's took over there.
Not. But in terms of U.S. interests, in terms of these hundreds of millions of dollars, of these billions of dollars, I don't think it's illegitimate to ask, what's the end game? And
I think that, first of all, I hear you that we, for supplying things, we have a say, or we can attach conditions. I don't know that there haven't been conditions. And I think even like the kinds of support that we've provided, there was the whole thing with the jet planes or the range of the missiles that we provide, because we want to make sure that what we're using isn't going to be used to, attack mainland Russia or whatever. But I just don't think the conflict is at a position where that's the negotiation that's happened. And I don't know if behind the scenes they've said, look, Crimea is definitely on the table. And I feel like I've heard Zelensky say that they'd be willing to have that negotiation. The problem is, like, you also rob this conflict of the greater context, which is that the invasion started almost 10 years ago, and Putin at every turn has proven completely unwilling to act.
All right, he's saying the invasion started 10 years ago.
Right, he's characterizing Crimea as the beginning of the Russian invasion. He's not operating from a material understanding.
But he gets away with saying all of this on his channel, and how many people are just going to believe him if Sam doesn't push back on it? He's doing rapid fire like mis or disinformation. It honestly seems to me like an op, because if I were the U.S. military industrial complex, I'd be hiring someone to be on channels and do shit like what this guy's doing on his channel. I would do that. It's a very cheap way to push their propaganda. And if Sam is not ready to play defense on that and just lets them get away with it, that is so problematic.
Well, I mean, we don't watch Majority Report for a reason.
I don't. Yeah. I miss it for a reason. Reagan's a frequent guest. What could go wrong? This is like why I don't argue with my parents. Because I'm like, y'all think that your arguments are good just because you have an argument. And I'm like no longer willing to give that energy anymore. But like Sam just keeps falling for it all the time. Okay.
This guy is a regular call-in. Like, I get that why he's using kid gloves on the guy.
Oh man. They need someone over there to push back. It doesn't seem like they have anybody, and that's why they get away with it. That's why I'm very careful over here. Because nobody is impervious to propaganda. Nobody, not even me. All right, let's keep going. 12 minutes in.
Actually abide by any negotiations. So, if you're asking the Ukrainians to, like...
Hold on, let me go back 10 seconds.
And the problem is, like, you also rob this conflict of the greater context, which is that the invasion started almost 10 years ago, and Putin at every turn has proven completely unwilling to actually abide by any negotiations. So, if you're asking the Ukrainians to, like, okay, well, we'll give you these annexed territories to then just, take it on good faith that that's going to be the end of the conflict, and that Putin's not going to use it to regroup and launch another attack in another 5 years. So, I mean, he's not a negotiating partner that I think you can sit down with in good faith. And so, like, me personally, like, Crimea is totally a gray area. And I think the Ukrainians would probably, if the war gets to that point, be willing to say, okay, fine. We're going back to the 2014 borders, and, we'll have another referendum or something in
do you think the U.S.
Crimea,
let me ask you this: do you think the U.S. I mean, that may be the case in terms of Ukrainians. Do you think the U.S. Do you think that like, I mean, let me put it this way: do you think that the Biden administration is providing these funds because they're concerned about transgender kids in Ukraine? Like, I mean, the thing is that I think that, like, I accept.
I do think. Look, this is what I think. I think it's bullshit to say. I mean, look, I've got my fair share of cynicism pumping through my veins, but to sit here and say, as I've heard on this show, oh, you know who loves this? Lockheed Martin. Yeah, they probably fucking do, but Lockheed Martin loves 365 days of the year every year.
That's a stupid fucking sentence.
I don't, like, yeah. Does that mean you ignore it? Like, what is that argument even?
It's not an argument. That's not an argument.
It's like, yeah, this makes, I don't know. This makes Kissinger happy, but Kissinger's happy every day of the year. What? Okay. Not a material analysis. And the majority report just lets this guy fill up 40 minutes of a non-material analysis. Live in a corner, here comes the irrationality. Just wait for the literal black and white way of looking at it. Here we go.
Without a doubt.
Period. Those are the waters they're swimming in. But what I do think, and you've hinted at this, is that we thought they were going to get their asses kicked.
Started long before 2014. I would say that the invasion started with the dissolution of the USSR.
How about that? No context of West intervention. Yeah, dating back to pre-91, right? Come on, the whole context. None of that's being brought up here.
Yeah, I mean, like, you can't discuss what's happening in Xinjiang province of China unless you understand the collapse of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of the Turks. It's not just China is repressing Muslims in this province. You have to go back, well over 100 years to understand some of these things. History didn't start when you think it did.
Yeah.
Or whenever it's convenient for you.
They're doing 40 minutes of this. They're able to talk about allegedly projecting how, I guess they believe Ukraine is so much nicer to LGBTQIA people, but they're not able to talk about any of these other things and bring actual context to the discussion. I think they're failing their audience.
And they had a president on the internet saying, like, I'm ready to get killed and martyred, and they're handing out AK-47s in the streets of Kyiv, and we realized, like, they have a well-trained army, and the weapons that we provide can make a difference. And so that's what we've done. Like, are there plenty of cynical actors? Sure, but guess what? Like, was Biden gonna sit there?
No. Listen.
The world
You're
supporting Ukraine.
Sam gets paid to fail his audience. Well, please pay me for not failing you.
Love your face.
Love your face. If y'all want to support the channel, I appreciate that very much. Love your face.
And go, you know what? It's too expensive. We're going to watch them get killed on live TV.
I have never, ever said that we should not have been providing them weapons and material. I have never.
All right. So that's Sam on the record saying that, yes, he wants to give Ukraine arms and money. This means, and we're to assume that he knows that these arms are also ending up in the hands of literal Nazis in Ukraine. So this is very problematic, I think. I'm not going to focus on this part of the problematic portion of the interview because I want to focus on something else. But I think that's pretty fucked up. I think these people need to be on the record for supporting arming Nazis in Ukraine. That's me. But again, I'm not going to focus on that right now.
Said that.
And you know what? I agree with you that there's all kinds of cynical interests baked into the case.
But my point is this.
I think his audience would not forgive him if he said, no, we shouldn't be doing that. But I don't know why. I don't know if that's why he does that. Either way.
But my point is this: is that I don't care. I don't care about the cynical interest. Obviously, when
well, you brought it up, so you
no, but wait. But let me just. You're not letting me finish. Why it's relevant? It's relevant because while you may say, and maybe the Ukrainian people,
he's okay with arming Ukraine, aka he's okay with empowering U.S. Hegemony, U.S. imperialism. These are the same people to these would be the same types of people to characterize what Russia is doing in Ukraine as imperialism, but apparently, and that's apparently bad. But of course, they're supporting U.S. imperialism, which is actually, if you look at the scale of imperialism, it's much worse. So I feel like most of the time, a liberal makes an argument, it's bullshit, and there's a reason for it. They just haven't figured out why.
Broadly may say, we're willing to negotiate about Crimea. We're willing to negotiate about various parts of the Donbass. We're in a zone now where, and like I say, I don't think the U.S. thought it would be. I don't think the administration thought we would be here. Everyone was surprised, I think, on some level that A, Ukraine's response was so strong, and B, that the Russian military was so really a paper tiger in many respects. And there's no doubt in my mind that how if you were to negotiate Crimea or not, or vice versa, like at the end of this, and we don't know where the end is, and that's my point. But at the end of this, Putin's not going to be in a position to sort of regather and go out. I mean, they've lost 100,000 troops.
100,000 troops? Have you heard this before?
I don't know where that number is coming from, but
100,000
certainly
troops?
there's been losses.
100K? Chat, do you have a number on that?
Their military is decimated.
I've heard up to 100K,
which is why,
but again, like sources are sus. I've heard for between 60 and 100.
The decimated? Maybe closer to 10? Why is he pushing this 100K? He's like also carrying water for manufacturing consent. You're going to say 10K, it doesn't help the United States manufacture consent for war and arming Ukraine, so he's got to go with 100K. Is Russia, the Russian military decimated? Is that accurate? That doesn't sound accurate.
Yeah, no, decimated. It's not.
Just sounds like
I mean, they
Lipko.
just activated 300,000.
Yeah, what about the
troops.
300K? This
I don't know
seems-
if that's decimated.
All right. I don't know about that.
Maze brings up a good point that Russia didn't just carpet bomb the shit out of the entire country and then
Yeah.
roll in, which is what we do.
Yeah.
So that probably impacted some of the outcome. Which isn't to say that Russia should have carpet bombed Ukraine,
Oh,
because that's also wrong.
right. All right. I bet he says that they're running out of munitions. Well, that's actually, I think, again, Imperial projection. That's what's happening on the Ukraine
Yeah,
side.
we are the ones that are running out of munitions. We're having
Yeah.
to ramp up production to keep feeding the HIMARS.
Yeah.
And who knows how long it'll take for those missile systems to make their way to the field.
It's just so wild how much there is in this video to push back against. I just can't. It's an entire, like, what are they doing on the show?
why they were relying on Iranian advisors to come and show them how to send their kamikaze drones over there.
Kamikaze drones? Sam. Why are they a kamikaze drone, homie? What is this? It just sounds like he's on CBS. Dude.
I have no sympathies.
Yeah.
Well, I think he started on NBC, didn't he?
I don't know. Maybe. He just sounds like he's just pushing State Department propaganda. This is just how they talk about it. He's just so imperialist about this. It just seems shameless.
Yeah, the kamikaze drone is definitely like our propaganda framing making its way into his talking points. Absolutely.
Like, why don't we call them kamikaze javelins? Why doesn't he call it a kamikaze Stinger missile? It's the same function. What the fuck? Why do they do this? It's really annoying. And honestly, all right, let's just keep watching.
For the Russian military. But I guess my point is that, like, the advantage that it is in the interests of the Biden administration at one point, and of the U.S. National security state and foreign policy apparatus, at one point, I don't think we're there yet, but at one point, pressing that advantage may supersede, at one point, what, frankly, is in the best interests of Ukraine. And like you say, we don't know if there are conditions that are placed on the Ukrainians now with these weapons. We don't know. And all I'm saying is that I do not think it is inappropriate, whether it's us entering into a conflict or us financing a conflict. I don't think it's inappropriate for the American public to want to hear an articulation as to whereabouts are the end game. And I understand you don't want to say, like, well, we're going to finance this up until, the border of Crimea. I understand you don't want to be explicit about it, but to have no discussion whatsoever in this country about the end game or the goals behind this, they're unarticulated, I think is very, very dangerous.
Yeah. dangerous.
Because
I'm fine with that conversation, but what I'm hearing
It's fine with
a
it.
lot is that that's the only conversation that some people want to have. And I've heard on this show a 20-minute conversation multiple times where at the very end you'll be like, I guess Putin did go a little too far. Like that's on the back end of the conversation you want to have about, isn't this already too expensive?
Totally tone policing him.
And, and even with Digby, at the end it was sort of like, oh yeah, I guess there were some mass graves. And to me, like, you know, the conflict will get to the point that you're talking to. But like as massive amounts of territory are being retaken and a fascist military is being defeated.
Listen, how many tens of thousands of people did we help kill in Yemen? Like, I mean, you're asking.
We're not talking, Sam, we're not talking about Yemen.
But you're talking
about Iraq too. Let's talk about Iraq.
Well, no, I have talked about Iraq. But my point is this: is that like you're complaining about the nature of the coverage and the conversations here, and if you're going to do that, if you're going to like talk about the nature.
See how he wanted to jump from one thing to the next. He doesn't want to get pinned down on any one thing.
Of the coverage and the conversations, then you also then what we're talking about is how we're covering it and the questions that we're asking. And in that instance, it's like we're not emphasizing the mass graves in Ukraine relative to what? Relative to what? Because they don't exist in a vacuum. There are tens of thousands of Yemenis that we have actively facilitated their deaths. And we haven't dedicated weeks or hours of shows on that.
I'm talking about within the universe of Ukrainian conversation. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes, but it's not fair for you to limit, like in the you know, like we're not putting enough emphasis on mass graves in Ukraine. Well, there's a lot of things that we don't put emphasis on, and I understand, like, you know.
No, but what I'm.
But let me just jump in, guys. This is my point about like making sure that trying to negotiate some sort of peace as an emphasis isn't because I think Putin's a worthwhile partner in that. I think you're probably right about his motives. It's about U.S. credibility, frankly, Reagan. I agree with you when you don't like seeing Evo Morales embrace Putin. I think that's bad. Evo Morales was cooed by America, right? Like we don't have a trust with this sort of stuff. So I think that's why I think it's important to have those sorts of conversations. And sure, we can emphasize like the atrocities, but atrocities happen the longer wars are prolonged. And so I don't think you continue wars to like vengeance for atrocities.
Well, I mean, that goes back, I guess, to the point I made earlier. I don't see Western supplied weapons as prolonging the war. I see.
Well, that's because he's wrong.
Okay. It's one of the wackiest things to say. Because the question would be, okay, so if the West stops sending guns, do you think the war will end sooner? Or do you think it'll go on longer? Obviously, it'll end sooner because Russia will win sooner. So obviously, it prolongs the war. That's why they want the guns. He's gaslighting. That is an entire gaslight. That's not vibes. That's propaganda. That is disinformation. You just got lied to. He's such a fucking liar, dude. That is a Weasley lie. I'm sorry. That's a fucking lie.
Still lying to Sam's
still
audience.
Lying. I think that's really fucked up, and Sam just lets him get away with it.
See them as hastening the victory of what is sort of plainly the correct side of this war, in my opinion, and the defeat of an evil fascist empire. So, I mean, I hate to put it in such black and white terms, but that's how this happened to go down.
I think he loves to put it in black and white terms, actually. He's a fucking gaslighter.
And it makes it much more comfortable to have things in black and white terms.
Black and white terms, literally vibes based. I hate to put it in black and white terms, then don't do it. But you're doing it, and obviously you want to. You want to put things in black and white terms. Well, that's not how you look at geopolitics, baby.
Saying, oh, you need to lead every show with mass graves, or that you have to have the mass grave report where you compare all mass graves in the world. What I'm saying is, in the context of mentioning Ukraine, it seems to only come up with a sigh and an eye roll about how much it's costing and how soon can we end it, instead of saying, in my opinion, the argument should be made for intervention. And if you don't think so, then make that argument instead of just.
That's not what Sam's making, dude, but he's actually pushing him to make that argument, which is wild to me. He's already ceded that ground to you in the debate, but you're sort of pushing Sam. He's like poking Sam to make it, I think, because there's people on my side of the argument that are like, no, don't do it at all. And that's why I think this is an op. He's trying to poke him from both sides. What do you think?
It certainly could be. I think that additionally, it could be that he is so fixed on
Yeah.
the war and his side, and he has Majority Report probably as his primary source of media. So the fact that they aren't, rabidly Slava Ukrainianing constantly and raising money for signmyjavelin.com or whatever dumb shit, it probably makes him uncomfortable to some degree
Yeah.
because Sam's not, getting the Ukrainian trident tattooed on his back. Um,
Yeah.
so it's the vibes. Sam's
They're,
just not, hitting the vibe check for this guy, Raygun.
yeah. All right. Oh, and welcome to the Mass Grave Report with Ronald Reagan. Imperialism report.
Hey, just since we're paused real quick, we have a
Sure.
conversation about I guess people who are trans and whether or not there's oppression there or whether or not that's a some sort of bourgeoisie thing. I just want to say for me personally, a person who says they are a woman is a woman. A person who says they're a man is a man. That's how that works.
Yeah.
I'm not
Fair enough.
necessarily speaking for the community, but that's how that works.
Yeah. That's how that works here too. All right. I'm not sure where that's coming from, but thanks for bringing that up. I want to know why some of the comment section so cursed. You're asking, did someone direct all the NAFO sickos there, or has MR been living long enough to cultivate them? Probably. Well, if this video is any indication, it appears as though they bend the knee to NATO to a certain extent. He's saying yes. He said yes. Keep arming them. He's admitted that Sam's admitted the entire way that he wants to arm Ukraine. He's just saying, okay, well, where do we end? Where does it stop? What he doesn't ask is, should we be doing it to begin with?
Getting to the point, or maybe isn't willing to admit it, but is certainly saying, hey, like, I'm not comfortable with continuing to arm Ukraine without something. Like, there has to be an end game. We can't just keep pouring billions of dollars of money and resources into this country. We can, but shouldn't. It just doesn't make sense.
It seems though a proper understanding of history informs us that they will.
Oh yeah, we probably will continue to.
Just like they have been the last 8 years.
Well, because what's the expense of a few $100 billion when the reward is potentially all of Russia?
Yep. All right, we're halfway through the video. We're doing good. Let's keep going.
Just sort of rolling around and like, well,
but I think
we need to announce now somehow, like the info. And you just mentioned that.
I feel really strongly that regardless of whatever conflict we get involved in, that it should be completely articulated as to what the parameters are and what we're willing to go. Are we willing? Let's put it this way: right now, after spending billions and billions of dollars on weapons, there has never been. Like, are we willing to drop a nuke on Moscow? I hope not. Are we willing to drop a nuke on Russian civilians? I want to know what the parameters are for this thing that we're engaged in. And yes, the idea that within the context of this country, there's not enough coverage about that Ukraine is in the right here. I'm sorry, that's not the case. I mean, I watched the news. There is no debate whatsoever about the parameters or the conditions or whatever. It is just the money flows. There has not been, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been even a touch on the gas. The only thing that I have seen is like some vague notion that the Republicans get in power, they're going to tap the brakes on this. I don't think they will. But and I don't think that's necessarily preferable at all. I just don't think it is healthy for this country to be putting money out the door like that without any conversation, because it sets the precedent for, it allows for things like Yemen.
Continues the precedent.
It allows for, I mean,
it does not challenge the precedent. The precedent is set. That's the thing that's not entering in the conversation, is that it's already set and it's demonstrated itself to be bad, illegitimate. I hate to make things so black and white for you, but come on. You can ask yourself the question whether or not the United States or NATO or the UN's ever had a good intervention. And if that doesn't make it black and white for you, then I don't know. I'm not making it black and white. I'm just helping you put the evidence together to demonstrate to yourself that if we had a black and white understanding of things, it would be the opposite of the way that they're describing it. There's not been a good UN intervention. Let me know if you disagree.
The precedent that we can fund. I have seen.
I don't want to call in.
And I'm
going to make this video. I'm going to put it on YouTube and call it a day.
Not an apologist for Putin.
There doesn't appear to be anyone over there that I want to impress. So, like, why would I?
I have seen literally a dozen of Putins that this country has been able to rally around to fight one war or another in one fashion or another. I'm not saying that Putin is a good guy. Obviously, I don't think I've ever said a decent word about Putin in 18 years of doing this professionally. But what I do know about this country is that if they get into the mode of pouring money into wars, it just goes and goes. And it may not be an issue in the context of this conflict with Ukraine and Russia, but the idea that we can present at least one, and I think it's reasoned, I really do think it's reasonable to present like some notion that we should not willy-nilly, without any type of public conversation on the merits or the conditions or the parameters of funding a war. Never mind even the aspect of the potential nuclear escalation. I frankly think that is somewhat overblown on some level. On some level. Oh my
God.
But just of any conflict, I just think that is
just happy to ignore it.
Very bad thing to train the American public to do, and it is a
right.
And so today it may be for a just reason, but there is no distinguishing between today for a just reason and yesterday for Yemen in a completely unjust reason, or tomorrow in some Western African country.
There is distinguishing.
Just gonna say, like, baked into their arguments is that there are good wars that the United States does. That's what's baked into what he's saying. But is that true? It's not. It's just simply not true. The United States has never engaged in a good intervention. And if they want to point to a good example, I would like for them to say that. Sam's never said that. No. I do believe in either earlier in this conversation or coming up, he's going to say like a good war or something like that. Like a good intervention. I'm not trying to straw man him for sure, but I guess let's keep watching. And if I'm wrong, I'm happy to be wrong.
That's like why we have smart shows like this one, so that we can distinguish when it's justified and when it's not. And I think
sorry, I think that's maybe what we were getting at. See, right there, when it's justified and when it's not. They're baking into their argument that sometimes it is. And I'd like for them to have pushback on that. When has it been justified?
Admitted it a minute ago.
And if it's never been justified, they need to bake that analysis into everything they're saying, but it's simply not. That was Reagan's argument, to be fair. Thank you.
Like really basic operational reasons why you wouldn't come out and say, you know what, we're thinking next spring we're going to get kind of tired of this. Like there's obvious reasons why Biden's not going to come out and say April 1st.
We'll see if Sam pushes
and,
back.
That's it for us. We're tapping out.
I get that.
Okay, well, so it seems obvious.
But you don't think there should be any conversation about this at all?
Well, I think we can have conversations about, like, to what extent should we get involved in any conflict, of course. But then that's, I guess, kind of my point. I would like the conversation to be about that. Like, when is it justified? Like, is this a justified intervention to send HIMARS so that they can blow up ammo dumps, far away, or air?
He's already said He's already said that he wants to. So why does he keep poking him on that?
We can have that conversation about any of these.
It just, in my experience, I thought when the UN, the entire UN Security Council, approved protecting Benghazi from Gaddafi.
I'm going to go Benghazi here.
And China, Russia, U.S., whoever else was sitting on the Security Council at the time, obviously France and England, signed off on protecting the people in Benghazi because Gaddafi had sworn that he was going to level the city, kill several hundred thousands of people.
All right. I need to learn more about this. This could be a deep dive we do someday. Is that what happened? Did Gaddafi say that?
Yeah, I would have to look into that more. I would
I
have to
don't
look
know
into
about
that
that.
more.
All right, we'll have to talk about it. Because I can't push back on it effectively if I don't know enough.
I thought that was a legitimate exercise, both because...
So he's convinced the UN Libya intervention, sorry, is that right? Was justified. At the time, he was convinced it was justified. Justified.
You're stopping a potential genocide. And the only way of assessing that, in my mind, was to basically outsource that obligation to the UN. If China, Russia, and the United States can agree on something, or the entire Security Council can agree on it, then that to me was like, I definitely believe that we should be using military to stop genocide, but the hard part is, like, how do you establish that? And I deferred to the UN out of my desire for internationalism. And that went super, super sideways.
No, those words I don't think belong in leftist spaces.
Yeah, I don't know about
hard
that
part
desire
is, like,
for
how do you establish that?
internationalism. Like, I get that sentiment of like wanting the appearance of objectivity. But that doesn't always
Let me
And I
hear this
definitely
again.
believe that we should be using military to stop genocide, but the hard part is, like, how do you establish that? And I deferred to the UN out of my desire for internationalism.
What?
And that went...
What the fuck? So did you learn? Like, how could you be so wrong about that? The UN, international organization. Like, what the fuck? Does he think the UN is good for the international world? What? Come on. These are the people with huge platforms. Oh my God, what is he saying?
I think that that is like the liberalism and the international world order sort of coming out. The idea that like there needs to be an international uh, uh, the word escaped me. But anyways, just it's
Yes, he admits that it goes bad, and I did pre-watch this, but at the same time, where does that desire come from to defer to the UN out of desire for internationalism? Where does that even come from? And if you're going to have that desire, you're going to see what happens, and you're not going to see through that desire. You're not going to see that UN is like just a singularly bad organization and should be opposed. Like, it doesn't seem like he's connecting those dots, is what he's saying. So let's keep listening.
Super, super sideways.
It went super sideways.
And I think there should be, when we
Why? Why did it go sideways? It was because it was never designed to go rightward up. And he doesn't have that analysis.
are financing a war, we should, at the very least, be discussing these things as a nation. And if this discussion was super prominent in this country, on cable news or in the newspapers, I would feel less of an obligation
Is it
to
not?
entertain that discussion because it's already being discussed. But I mean, it's not. And so, and again, where, I land on this, I have never said that we should stop funding this. I have never said that we should allow Putin to do X, Y, or Z. And it is really just, I think that when we are funding a war, whether we think it's a just war or an unjust war. We need to.
There it is. That's what I was remembering. He says whether we're funding a just war or an unjust war. That implies that he believes in just wars. Am I wrong? That it means he implies he believes in just U.S. interventions. Or he should just say there are none.
To have a public conversation about it, and it's just simply not happening.
Instead, they frame it, okay, well, how much do we fund this war? Whether or not it's just to begin with. And I think if you have a material understanding, there are no just wars fought by the UN. Got to go all the way back to World War II, calling it a just U.S. intervention?
Did we intervene, or were we drawn into the war?
I know you're a new chatter, so I'm not sure how much you know about this. Did we really intervene, or do we really wait to intervene? Who did the real intervention during World War II? Who won World War II? Who beat the Nazis? Infinite Paint. This is a question for you. Who beat the Nazis? You get one chance. Both. What? The fuck? Are you wasting my time, dude? Come on. This is not baby talk. And if you want to have baby talk, go somewhere else. Who won World War II? Come on, homie. Actually, no, I'm done with you. You don't deserve my time. All right. Goodbye. All right, back to the video.
Yeah. All right. I love you guys.
Love you too, Reagan.
All right, man. Feel better.
That's it. He says I love you.
If it makes you feel good, all the IMers are in favor of what you're saying.
Yeah, you win.
You won.
Okay. Are they going to keep talking about it?
Let's see.
And then they keep talking? 13
Adam from
minutes of
Indiana.
aftermath?
If this wasn't Reagan calling you, you would tell the listener to go watch another show. He wants to dictate what topics you're talking about and how you frame it. That's maybe correct.
But he's a good caller.
Yeah, no, but he's a good caller. He's contributed more to the show than half the time than I have.
He actually does work for the show, basically.
All right, let's read some of these IMs because this is guy hijacks the show. It's classic.
Trying to get sympathy with the whole COVID thing too.
That was smart. I mean, look, I do think that there is a conversation that we probably have not had on this program to any serious degree as to like the implications of Russia leading, exporting, being part of a sort of global fascist movement.
That framing, it's just so liberal.
They certainly are part of it. And I would.
Who's leading it? Who's leading it? If they're part of it, the United States is leading it, and it's way better at it. It's the fucking king of the global fascist movement. And you, Sam, take the side of the United States in this proxy war, giving them support. You've been saying, oh yeah, we should be arming them the entire way. Homie. They do this thing where like, yeah, well, fascism's bad. Okay, do you believe it? Do you know what that word means when you use it? Does the United States not apply to that to the nth degree more than Russia? Oh, well, Russia doesn't like gay people. Okay, do the United States next. Like, take a look around. This is a fascist police state. It is just wild. I think like his audience is just like, well, Russia's authoritarian and the United States is good. They just have bad analysis. They're still like onto that U.S. exceptionalism. Read some fucking Perenni. Go watch a Marvel movie. I think Sam's target audience is mainstream propagandized Dem voters that think Republicans are significantly more fascist. Yo, they hate Republicans because they're on the right, and they like will call them Nazis. But when it comes time to actually arming Nazis, they're like, well, I guess we got to give them guns. Like, come on! They don't actually believe the bullshit that they say sometimes. Not to lump Sam with this whole thing, but he does have some really bad takes here. All right. Where is Russia exporting fascism? Let me guess. Only country American hate? Yeah. All right. Here we go.
Suspect that if they were successful in those first couple of months in the invasion, the first couple of weeks, the first couple of months of the invasion, we would be talking much more about that than we are now. Like, you know, speaking for myself, I react to not only the facts as I absorb them through reading and from, you know, consuming media, but because of the nature of both how I entered in this business and how we're situated, I am influenced in terms of like what I think is important for me to talk about by the larger context of the conversation that's happening. And I think there are certain important things to be considered in the context of us funding the Ukrainians to fend off this invasion. There's no doubt in my mind that the invasion of Ukraine.
What about, like, the U.S. invading, the U.S. intervening? What about that? Why shouldn't people in the area be pushing back against the U.S. intervening? It's all about them framing it. Okay, the people in the area want to push back Russia. Well, that's not entirely true. They want to push back the United States as well. But the entire framing of this is Russia bad. The entire framing of this is, okay, well, the United States is good and Russia bad. That's what they're trying to do. And they just can't get it past me anymore.
Ukraine is an imperialist
US
project.
Wow, we're getting a raid here. Look at this. You love to see it. Thank you for the raid. No justice. Welcome into the show. This is the iDanSimpson Show with iDanSimpson. It me, iDanSimpson from the iDanSimpson Show with iDanSimpson. Today on the show, I'm talking about this new this video that from Majority Report. Sam's debated a caller on support for Ukraine. We've been talking about it. We've been going through it pretty patiently. Thank you so much for the raid. No justice. Love your face. Hope you had a nice stream today. I hope the UK politics are treating you well. I wonder what's happening over there. Let us know how your stream went, homies. Thanks for the raid. Everyone follow No Justice, MTG. Champion of the stream. I think you're going to love her. Yeah, thank you so much. What's up? Thought I'd return the favor after the raids. Yeah, I've been loving raiding out. Of course, you got the UK politics down pat, so it seemed relevant to be raiding out to you. I wonder what's happening over there. They pick a new person yet? How long does that take? Is it going to be David Cameron? Are they going to bring back Boris? Tony Blair again? UK politics is a fucking mess right now. What are you going to do? So I hope you're well. Welcome in. We've been watching this video again. Sam Cedar was debating this guy about Ronald Reagan about support for Ukraine, and I do feel like it's just like, I don't know, it really left out a lot. It left out a lot of important context, framing. Should the U.S. be intervening at all? They don't seem to bring that up. They didn't bring up the Minsk agreements, and they seem to entirely discount NATO and Western escalation. And of course, they're just engaging in pretty much as many Imperial dog whistles as possible. So we were watching it, and we're catching the end of it here, trying to see if what else we can wrap our heads around, see what else we can add to the conversation. So welcome in. New PM is going to either be Rishi or Boris. Both apparently have the nominations now, so will be voted on this week. Awesome. Thanks for the update. Wow. All right, so
by Russia.
And I'm talking right now with Rosspublica. Ross, say hi.
Hi.
All
How's
right.
it going?
Ross and I are talking about the video together and trying to analyze it as fairly as possible. Welcome in. We're going to finish the rest of this video, see if there's anything we can add to the conversation. Love your face.
Russia. Do I think that the expansion of NATO was problematic? I did, completely divorced from this issue, frankly. But do I think it was provocative? It could have been mildly provocative, but do I think it in any way was the provocation rose to the level of having Russia invade Ukraine? No. Do I think that's the primary reason why Putin invaded Ukraine? No.
All right. I could maybe agree with that.
Yeah,
Same.
I don't disagree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
I think NATO intervention certainly plays a role. I think the 2014 coup and the violence on the border certainly plays a role. None of that necessarily being justification for the invention or the invasion, uh, but it goes towards understanding the decision.
Yeah. It's not like that one thing in a vacuum would have done it, but it's not to say we should ignore it.
Right.
He says he's divorced from it, which means he just entirely discounts it from the calculus. I think that ain't it. But it's not the whole thing, but you can't ignore it. Okay, I'm watching on.
I think he has imperialistic ambitions. And I think this
land
is
for material reasons.
Yes. But all of that is like, that's covered. That's covered. When I survey the expanse of what is being discussed about this conflict, those boxes are checked. What I don't see is any debate whatsoever, or even just analysis, or even like consciousness that we are funding this.
He's saying he thinks NATO expansion is bad in and of itself? He is saying that?
And, we see the numbers that are presented to us publicly. I can assure you
Expansion.
that every number that we see publicly, you can times it by 0.5, by 1, and that's the number of that's the money that's going out through other channels that we don't
Maybe
see.
he's saying that. Good for him.
Whether it's covert operations, whether it's other, and I think that it merits a conversation as to like how far are we willing to go. I'm not calling for the end of it, but I am saying like there.
Can you pause it real quick? I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that's fine.
I want to address this comment from Unelectable Airwaves,
Yeah.
who is a known leftist propagandist and a statist.
Yeah.
If you have CIA-funded death squads killing people on your border, I'm sympathetic to interventions narrowly targeted to curtailing the death squads. What kind of statist interventionist crap is this? You make me sick. Sick, I tell you.
The only thing I can say that it's analogous to is like the way that we recognize the constitutional rights of, not the way that the Constitution constrains the way this country reacts towards, enemy combatants or people that we keep in Guantanamo. It really is like sort of like, this is more about what role we're going to play in the world. And I have no problem, or I have no reluctance or inability to justify supporting Ukraine in this situation.
Why?
Russia is the clear aggressor. It is imperialistic. Their imperialism cannot be in any way mitigated by our imperialism. There's no doubt that, in my mind, that what Putin is trying to do is essentially freeze to death half of Ukraine to break their will.
Love your face.
No doubt. And there is also no doubt in my mind that the Russian military turns out to be significantly more degraded than we anticipated. We, as a country, have always overestimated their capacity. Nevertheless, I do think it is important that this conversation exists. And if it was happening in other spaces in a reasonable manner, because people are talking about it in other areas and they're, talking about one division of the Ukrainian army, not even a division.
Oh, wow, yeah. Every accusation is an admission. The U.S. is going to freeze half of Europe because of fucking Nord Stream. gas prices.
I don't know, one company of the Ukrainian army that has, that is neo-Nazi, or has like, Nazi, sort of antecedents, which I think is, legitimate to criticize, but it's also sort of like you're looking at a pimple on an elephant's ass.
All right, so he's trying to minimize the problem of Nazis.
Yeah, that's
but without making a material analysis.
yeah,
I think that's
I
extremely
suspect
dangerous in itself.
the right-wing ultranationalist fascist problem in Ukraine is perhaps larger than he thinks it is.
Yeah, he wants to. That is really dangerous right there. Because the truth is this: he's trying to minimize the problem of Nazis. If the problem of Nazis in Ukraine is actually bigger than the problem that he's trying to paint, he's actually doing their propaganda. He's doing Nazi apologia. The Nazis aren't as big a problem as you think. These aren't the Nazis you're looking for, Dan. Some weird-ass Jedi Nazi mind trick. Now, I don't think he's as egregious as others who I've seen make a similar argument, but that is just very dangerous stuff, and I cannot let him slide. I can't let that slide.
Yeah, I think we've probably dug much deeper into the issue than he probably has. I'm guessing he's maybe hasn't quite dug into the depths of the ties between Azov and the Second Waffen SS division, and he's probably aware of Bandera, but not like the explicit ties between the OUMB and the development of whatever political party, and
Yeah.
but it would be good if he did.
I'll go to this thread. Saying Ukraine has a Nazi problem makes it sound like there's just a few losers roaming around the streets waving swastikas. If your schools, churches, businesses, government buildings, and military are embedded with Nazi ideologies, more than a problem, it's systemic. But they're just trying to make it seem like it's just a minimal problem. A shopping mall in Ukraine put up a banner of Stepan Bandera, and it read, "Our father is Bandera." When they say Slava Ukraini, and then they say, by the way, Slava Ukraini means Hail Ukraine, which they took from Hail Hitler. Those things are directly related. The next thing they say is Hail to the heroes. Who they're saying the heroes, when they're referring to the heroes, they're referring to Stepan Bandera, homies. Google who he is. How even SS officers thought his crimes were too grotesque. Shopping malls aren't a big deal. Here's a government building in Ukraine with huge Bandera banners. The wind ripped through the second picture. Get wrecked, fucking Nazi collaborator. Dmitro Negrik, a Nazi officer who was in charge of the auxiliary police responsible for the deaths of over 20,000 Jews, joined the UPA, has a statue in Ukraine. But Sam Cedar wants to make you think like it's not that big of a problem. There he is. An Orthodox church in Ukraine every year honors Nazi war criminal Roman Shikevich. Yikes. What could go wrong? 1943 Nazi war criminal Oles Beby, I don't know how to say that, commanded the massacres of two Polish villages, killed more than 300 Polish Jews. Here's an Orthodox priest blessing a plaque of him in Ukraine. It's not just it's not a little pimple on the ass, homie. It's not some pimple on the ass. Here's a Ukrainian children's book celebrating the UPA and Ukrainian Nazis' crimes against Jews in Europe. Come on, Sam. He's playing into these Imperial talking points, and it's very dangerous. He's letting his audience down. All right, I could go on.
I mean, I think that understanding the severity of this issue, the systemic nature of it, yeah, I would hope that he covers it because of its importance in understanding what's happening in Ukraine. Um, but I don't think his audience has the attention span for that depth of coverage.
They don't care. Yeah, they just want to go by a surface level understanding. Here's a bunch of kids standing next to a Nazi war criminal on a
Dan,
plaque.
you can't call kids Nazis.
Yeah. Ukrainian scouts from Plast Youth Organization honoring the Nazi SS Galizia division. We know about them. The SS divisions were defeated by the Red Army. Yo, they're just fucking Nazis, dude. They're everywhere. But Sam's gonna be like, oh, they're not that big of a deal. God damn it. I think that's really fucking stupid. I'm sick of that shit. Let's keep watching.
I don't know, one company of the Ukrainian army that has, that is neo.
It's just one company, Dan. You can ignore all those other pictures that we just saw, Dan. That's what he's saying.
Nazi, or has Nazi, sort of antecedents.
Oh, he looks like he's coping hard.
Which I think is, legitimate to criticize, but it's also sort of like you're looking at a pimple on an elephant's ass, essentially.
That is dangerous, homie. Putting in work for the imperialists.
Fascism is a cancer
at the
core of a society and has to be excised. No cancer should be accounted as small, especially when it's as large and systemic in Ukraine as it is.
And it's not just Azov Battalion, like walking around saying Slava Ukraini, which is a Nazi war cry. The whole army's saying Slava Ukraini. The whole army's saying this Nazi-ass war cry. And then they say glory to the heroes, talking about those Nazi collaborators but from before. All right, watching on. I think Sam's making a fool of himself.
And I feel like, at least in this space, we can bring up the questions that I think are important in terms of American behavior and that are important to bring up without it being the sort of knee-jerk campus stuff.
What does that mean? Knee-jerk campus? I honestly think he's like referring to someone like me when he says that. But I wonder what he means.
I think...
Yeah.
I feel like the knee-jerk campists are the people who immediately jumped to, we have to do everything for Ukraine.
Okay.
Or
Liberals.
The flip side of...
I'm confused.
Explicit support for Putin and the invasion. So people falling into these camps. Whereas I would say that you and I don't fall into a camp.
All right.
Because we're not picking teams. This isn't fantasy football. It's the real world with people's lives.
I'm not a sicko. I'm in the civilian camp.
Right.
All right. Okay. That makes sense now. Thanks for spelling that out for me. Okay. We'll go back 5 seconds.
And that are important to bring up without it being the sort of knee-jerk campus stuff. I mean, that's my
Which is a pronounced problem, but that's the reason we don't emphasize that. Like, there's so many idiots that are basically saying, yeah, Putin's justifiably fighting fascism. Like, that's
absurd. It's absurd. That's absurd. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't, like I say, it could be the most just war. And again, I bring up Libya because I have seen how things can start out in what I perceive to be with the best moral of intentions and the best process in which to make that assessment, and then see it turn into a shit show. And I just think there needs to be some conversation about it. And and when I see the absence of that conversation, it becomes more incumbent upon me. I'm inclined psychologically, however you want to do it, to discuss it. Okay, so let's read some IMs.
All right.
Let's see here. I don't have much time now. Going to have to hang up on everybody.
I didn't watch this part. Is this any good?
Ronald Reagan. All right, we're not going to have time for any more calls. Sorry, folks.
Okay.
We can pick this up on Thursday. We're going to have part of the super group on Thursday, right? Is that the plan?
On
Friday.
Friday. Yeah.
Friday.
Down here.
Let's see. Oh boy, here we go.
You
How are we going to pick this?
seems
super
like...
excited about that conversation and how it went.
Say that again, Ross?
You can tell that Sam's not like super
Yeah.
excited about that conversation and how it went. Like he looks a little gassed out. Like, oh
Yeah.
man, that's
Here's a mind. Once the U.S. creates a failed state, who typically fills that void once the empires exhausted their interest there? Look at Afghanistan. The most right-wing ideological sect came back to power, stronger than before the invasion. You can call it right-wing, but it's also anti-colonialist. I don't like framing things explicitly from the West's viewpoint. That's why all these libs hoping that someone in Russia ends with a bullet are psychotic. Yeah. What do you think the struggle to fill that huge power vacuum left by Putin would result in? I don't know. That seems like such a far hypothetical. You're talking about if they get rid of Putin? I don't know, homie. I don't know how to begin thinking about that. I'd like to continue referencing this video, though, because what was missing from the framing, and I got to get back into this now, is whether or not the U.S. should be intervening at all. We've been talking about it this entire time. If Sam's going to understand that in Benghazi, when allegedly Gaddafi said he was going to do a genocide, he thought that they were justified, and then he said it goes sideways. Okay, Sam, when has it not gone sideways? When has NATO, when has the UN, when has the U.S. done a good intervention that worked? And if the answer is never, then why are we not applying that same skepticism to what's happening in Ukraine right now? Is that not missing from the conversation? Ross, chat, is that not missing from the conversation? Whether or not the U.S. should be intervening at all based on the material analysis that NATO and the United States does not do good interventions. Is that not missing from the conversation? Was that missing, yes or no?
Sam touched on it
Okay.
briefly. I mean, when they talked about Libya and Iraq, and of course, like Ronald Reagan didn't want to talk about that because those are perfect examples of why we shouldn't be intervening in the ways that we do. I think that there are probably methods of intervention that aren't military that we could be engaging in that are would help bring about a more peaceful resolution. But that's not in capital's interest, so we aren't going to do those.
Yeah. Sam Cedar believes in intervening with kamikaze javelin missiles. Kamikaze stingers. Why is it only when they use it they're called he calls them kamikazes? It's fascinating. There was no mention of the Minsk agreements and completely discounted pretty much all Western and NATO escalation. Incredible how they did this. I think that piece was just off the charts. There were so many Imperial dog whistles. But I think
fundamentally, the question of should the U.S. be intervening at all should have been asked in 2014
Sam is
before
one
we
of
helped
those radical liberals
do
who
the coup.
believes in the folly of empire, instead of realizing that the folly is caused by the pursuit of empire. A useful tool for imperialism, condemning our international mistakes without understanding the class dynamics of the system that materializes those mistakes over and over.
Yeah, what Dimitri said. Did you catch that, Ross?
Yes.
Sorry,
yeah, that was spot on.
Yeah. Did that interrupt you? Did you have more to say?
No, I believe I had finished my thought.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, we stumble into empire. We accidented our way into becoming the lead imperial nation in the world.
Yeah. The whole war, I mean, that whole discussion, rather, just completely discounted the West's ambitions in the area. Like, barely touched on it. In fact, all they mentioned was what Russia wants out of the situation. But, homie, this is a proxy war, and all you're talking about is one side's ambitions? Come on, like, when are they going to realize we're being tricked right now, too? They think they're not being tricked. This is their audience. There's a meme for this. There's a meme for this. Their audience thinks they're not getting tricked about this after being tricked over and over and over and over again. But they just, I don't know, simply are. They lie to us about Iraq, about Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, weapons of mass destruction, Vietnam, Iran, North Korea, Venezuela, Guatemala, Honduras, Haiti, Cuba, Panama, Nicaragua. But they think they're telling us the truth about Ukraine. And I'm just... Yo, that's just the Majority Report audience. And I know it because they find their way over here sometimes. And I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about. But they want to do this browbeating thing. We're like, oh my God, how dare you not want to arm Ukraine? You can't tell that it's black and white. The guy with the girlfriend from Ukraine said that it's black and white, so I believe them. And then because Sam doesn't know how to effectively push back on it. Hey guys, they are failing their audience. And now I'm repeating myself. Probably time to end this piece, huh, Ross? Anything left to say?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, Sam does have considerations that you don't.
For sure.
With advertising and audience and all of that. That's not an excuse for why he may not be as explicit as he wants to be, or maybe he just doesn't have the analysis. Either way, that the conversation that they had was incomplete. It seemed like Ronald Reagan wanted to frame it in a specific way and maintain that framing to push Sam to, making some sort of pronouncement or coming to the same conclusion that he does. That we all need to suit up and get over there to the front line, each and every one of us, because this is the war that will make the difference between, civilization and barbarism. This is the conflict of, you know, society versus the deprivation of the red commie horde that's coming to take your means, your production, make you share a toothbrush, brother.
Exactly.
Hell yeah.
Oh yeah. All right. Well, I'm probably gonna post this up on the YouTube. Maybe people can find this analysis to be interesting and help spell out, number one, a better material analysis of what's going on there, and also by over there I mean in Ukraine, and also a better material analysis of what kind of content that they make over there on Majority Report. So, all right, I'm going to leave it at that.
Yeah.
Ross,
Sounds good.
thank you for helping me make some content today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Love your
Good
face.
to talk to you. Chat. I'll see you.
Pleasure.
I'll see you in chat.
All right. And that's that. Stick around, chat. We're going to continue after the break. Everyone else, hit that follow button here on YouTube. Subscribe. Support the channel. Love your face. Here we go. Yeah.